Welcome again to another episode of the Tech Marketing Podcast. I'm joined by actually someone who's not been on our podcast before, but who I've spent probably a decade working with back and forth. So very, very pleased to be joined by Luis. Welcome to the Tech Marketing Podcast, Luis.
Thanks so much for having me, John. I appreciate it. I am saying hi from Yuba City, California, north of San Francisco, close to Sacramento, at my wife's grandfather's fishing shrine. You could see, and there's a little gone fishing sign over here. So apologies for the busy background, but yes, it's where the world finds me right now. And it's school holidays. Our girls are visiting their cousins. And so we just crack on.
It's part of the world we're in now, where we have the ability in some of our roles to travel and enjoy the world. So yeah, enjoy it. Like, talking about roles that we're in and in your career, like we met 10 years ago now when you were back at Intuit.
Yeah, at least.
Like, when we were prepping for this, I really hadn't appreciated just how fascinating your career trajectory has been, Luis. Like, take us through that. Like, where did you start your career in tech and where have you ended up now?
That's really nice of you to say, John. Yeah, well, you go back quite a while. I'll take you back just a little bit before you and I met. I got into tech after spending a lot of time in food marketing. So I learned marketing after business school, got into a big FMCG or CPG company, as most people know them, as a food company, marketing Pillsbury toaster strudels, Nature Valley bars, Old El Paso food. It was wild. But eventually got into tech. In 2009, I joined Visa. And found that, I was interested in tech. Culture fit with Visa wasn't my cup of tea. So I ended up moving over to Intuit. And so I used to work for the competition of the place where I currently work. And, life is funny how it works. But yeah, 2010, I started in the world of cloud accounting. And it's wild to say that that's been over 15 years ago. And so yes, you and I met while I was part of my leading the QuickBooks Pro Advisor program, which is a big program, focused on accountants and bookkeepers. And you together were helping me with some marketing tools for accountants and bookkeepers. It was great.
That was always, I think everyone always has like one of those career defining projects in their life. That was one of those for me. Say one, we've got a few under our belt. Like, that was such a fun project to work on.
Yeah. I mean, we were going through a massive transformation, and, both Xero and QuickBooks since then have continued to transform. But yeah, that was a real moment in time where we at QuickBooks were going through a transformation from desktop into online. And that's exactly when we worked together on, building this online portal for our accountants and bookkeepers back then, John. And you're right. It's like we've never looked back.
What would you say the common thread has been through all the different firms you worked in? What's been what's been the common thread, really?
Yeah, well, I would say that I'm a learner, and it's one of those things. You take Gallup's, Strengths Finder, assessments, and you find out that, like, my number one strength is learner. And so what that means is I really just enjoy learning new things and asking a lot of questions. I'm a very curious person, and I've continued to want to learn more and more. And in the world of cloud accounting, there's still just a ton of learning within the different segments. And so, we'll definitely get into it, but I've played roles in marketing, product marketing, sales, product management, and knowing accountants and bookkeepers, small businesses, both. And so, I think that the thread has been certainly learning.
Yeah. I mean, I always say the same thing as well, Luis. Like, in fact, I was saying it to a team I was on with earlier, which is I'll always stick around until I stop learning, and that hasn't happened yet. In fact, if anything, the learning has accelerated. So having that like curious mindset, I think is absolutely vital. Like, you've worked in some of the biggest names in accounting tech, right? Intuit, and now Xero. Like, how have those different environments changed and shaped your approach to marketing?
I think the only name you didn't throw out there, John, but it's a company I worked for as well, was Receipt Bank, or Dext, out of Shoreditch. And all these different names in accounting and sort of accounting tech, I mean, they've shaped, my view on marketing, in that certainly accountants and bookkeepers have been through a transformation, right? And as they go through a transformation, we in marketing need to stay relevant for them in different ways. And so you just have to continue to evolve. I mean, you and I have discussed a lot about how digital marketing is a whole different thing now than it was even 5 years ago. And so what I find is for people like me, even when you stay in the same industry, like your job evolves. And so, the industry evolves, your customers evolve, and you evolve with it. And so that's actually, I think, a bit of a competitive advantage that tech companies have when they're looking to engage with people like me who like to learn. It's a great place to be because just by even like standing in the same spot, you continue to grow. So, yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but I do think that, tech has been changing a lot, which means all of our job descriptions change year after year.
We've never seen so much disruption as we've seen the last couple of years. Not just the stuff that happened in 2020, but in the last 2 or 3 years, we've also had AI. Do you think our jobs have, and this is a bit of a leading question, do you think our jobs have got easier or harder? And if so, what? Like, why? What's our thinking there?
If you think about the complexity in different vectors, whether it's like how to target a customer, like how to reach them, et cetera, I don't see a single vector upon which it's gotten easier. Like everything has gotten, more complex. Now, I think part of our jobs is to figure out what is noise and what is the real signal and, then focusing on that. But yeah, it just continues to get more and more complex. And so what I find, in jobs like mine now that are not focused on one geography, we're looking at 10 geographies at once. You really need to distill, what is most important that we're all going to focus on. You try to make it as relevant for as many of our regions as possible, and then you go, right? But you certainly can't let analysis paralysis take over because that would be very easy to do.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And it's not just, for me, it's not just the analysis, it's the kind of feeling that you need to be busy when actually there's an element of just saying, I just need absolute clarity. I need to know, to use your phrase there, like what is the signal that I should be paying attention to, and what is just noise that I can put off to one side.
It's true. No, there's a lot of noise, and more. If you there are more numbers. There have never been more numbers, right? We have more dashboards and more tools, like call it Tableau, Mixpanel, whatever it might be. We look at a lot of different tools. It's easy to become overwhelmed. So we gotta, it's our job to not be.
You had this great phrase when we were talking before, actually, Luis, that's really stuck with me. You mentioned about being curious and use this phrase, put me in coach. Like, how is that, looking at some of the different roles? You're currently executive general manager for global partner marketing, if I've got that job title correct.
That's correct. At Xero, correct.
And before then, you were in charge of payroll, I believe, at Xero, like quite varied roles. You went product management to partner marketing and channel. Like, we were talking about this attitude of being curious and putting me back in coach. What does that really mean? Like, how do you apply that to your career?
Sure. Well, I think that the way it came up in our conversation, John, you were just talking to me about maybe asking me what are some of my philosophies for, how to grow a career, et cetera. And I think my simple answer to that was, if your boss brings you an interesting opportunity, and chances are, it's going to be a challenging one, but it's interesting and where you think you're going to learn, my answer has always been, put me in coach. Right. If your coach thinks that you can handle it, if your coach thinks that it's important, if your coach thinks that it's hard and difficult, I think you should take that opportunity with both hands and just go for it and grab it. What's the worst that can happen? Our CEO at Xero, Sukhinder Singh Cassidy, she wrote a book about creating possibility, it's called. And basically her thought is our careers are a portfolio of risks. And frankly, by not taking tough, opportunities, you're sort of choosing not to take a risk, which, by the way, is probably a risky proposition unto itself because, like careers continue to move forward. If you build a career that has a portfolio of risks, you're going to continue to learn and it's going to, take a nice shape. If you choose not to take risks, then frankly, you're opening yourself up to, getting stuck or not growing your career or, really not growing and not developing, which again, so I go back to put me in coach. That has been absolutely a philosophy I believe in no matter what. And so back to your point, I've been at Xero just over 4 years. I started in the go-to-market team, and within about 8 months, they brought me over to the product management side of the house. So I ran the account and bookkeeper division on the product management side, working very closely with engineering, as you can imagine. I had done some product work at QuickBooks. And so they said, hey, cool, product, let's bring it, we need some help in the world of accountants and bookkeepers. Then they brought me over to payroll products as well. And then a year ago, I came back to marketing, which is frankly where I've spent most of my career. So yeah, just one more time, just to repeat it. But I think it is important, when your coach tells you about a tough opportunity, put me in, coach, is in my opinion, a great way to go.
I mean, and there's stuff I really want to unpick here, because I think it's an important point, especially when marketing is going through, every role is going through so much disruption. That approach of like, just get involved. Like, have you had any instances where, you've not been as, you've been put in the team, you're out there in the field, and it's not gone as smoothly as you'd expect. Or is there a certain nuance to making sure you're getting the right level, and you drive the metrics and manage the risk? Because it can be risky going into a new role.
Absolutely is. No, it is every time. And John, I mean, I think part of what comes with put me in, coach, is you have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. Like, that is going to happen. And that happens almost every time, almost by definition, right? If you're coming in to learn something new, you are going to go through a bit of a transition period. You're going to have to, at times, through trial and error, figure out what is truly important, what are the key metrics you're going to focus on. And so it's something that I work on very, a lot on, early in my roles, is, am I really aligned with my manager on what is most important? Like, what are the key metrics that are really going to go and focus on? And even my current manager now, Michael Strickman, he's our CMO at Xero. He jokes with me about the fact that, once I figure out what is important, man, I stay, really, really focused on it. Perhaps even too much so, but I think it's really important to know what's important, and then to focus all of your efforts and your team's efforts, because again, analysis paralysis can set in. The noise can take you in many different directions. I prefer to stay, and focus on one direction, and just keep the team clear, on that. And then if direction changes, then, pivot accordingly, communicate widely, and then move quickly.
There's so much even there. I'm going to be honest as well. When I first heard put me in, coach, I actually saw it as put me in, coach, not put me in, coach. So there's a slight nuance there, but I think both work, because talking about curiosity, there's also an element of like just removing the ego element and just saying, I'm here to learn. So actually, I read something slightly different to what you were saying there.
Well, but I think that the point that goes along with that, maybe this is even a third dimension to it, is this is another one of just my philosophies, but I think resilience is a really important trait, right? And it's one that I genuinely absolutely believe, if you've read Mindset, the book by, I believe it's Carol Dweck. If you're open to learning, again, but you have to be open to a little bit of discomfort here and there, you're going to grow, and when you're put in positions like that. And sometimes you are going to bump into some walls here or there, right? And you're going to, but I think if you are resilient, you will continue to move forward. Your career will continue to develop. You will come up with new insights. And so it's just so important to, to not only, be open to being put in by the coach, but to just keep going. And then, obviously over time, you then get to coach others, and which is also an exciting dimension.
I actually queued up Mindset to read next, so I'm very looking forward to that. But like, cut to the chase, and I completely agree with resilience, by the way. The whole grit piece, the Angela Duckworth approach, is something that I subscribe to. Like, what advice, having gone through those different roles and the different elements of your career, what advice would you give to an aspiring leader looking to reach kind of your level in a marketing company today?
I mean, I think in general, it's easy to say this, and it's harder to do, but I find it really eye-opening when you have a conversation with your manager and say, like, what is really keeping you up at night? What are the toughest challenges you're dealing with? And if they're thinking about it, there's probably a lot of learning that can take you from where you are to where they are, right? And what they're thinking about. And so if you continue to A, learn about those topics, but B, take them head on and, or at least move in that direction, you can't go wrong. And so, how they talk about, embrace the biggest possible challenge ahead of you. Like I believe that works. Sometimes that can put you in very uncomfortable situations, but it leads to the biggest learning, and at the end of the day, these careers are all about learning. And honestly, we talked about this too, John. I'm sure at some point maybe you wanted to talk about it. So as I just mentioned to you, I'm in marketing now, but I've done a lot of product management roles in my background, sort of over the last, 20 years. Product management has made me a better marketer. And I can now easily see that. But man, while I was going through learning product management and how to work better with engineering teams and how to create better experiences, I never would have thought that. But yeah, I'm a better marketer now because I did product management. I'm a better marketer now because I have had some sales roles where I've led sales teams. All those things really round me out. And, again, I couldn't have said that even 3 years ago, but now I can. And I'm thrilled that I have those arrows in my quiver.
Let's dive into that because, at the moment we're all becoming, especially with the pace of change and how we're moving into AI, all of us are becoming a little bit of a product manager, I would say. Like what are the particular skill sets you've brought from product into marketing that have made you better?
There's some things that are, very similar and can make you, if you're a marketer and you're a really good marketer, can make you a decent product manager. At the core, you need to be focused on the customer and you need to understand, what are their pain points? What's really holding them back? How do you make things easier for them? And how do you unlock growth for them? But I think the key thing that I've taken away is in marketing, we see a lot of numbers, we see a lot of funnels, and through a funnel, you can start seeing where the friction might be in an experience or in a journey. For me, what is very clear now is if I see a funnel that looks like it's breaking, there's a big sort of piece of, friction or, conversion goes from 50% down to 5 in one step. My mind very quickly goes to, in what is that experience that customer is going through between here and here? Why is there so much friction? What is wrong with it? And what are some potential solves? So those things I, would have never put together a few years ago. Now that's just where my mind goes. Cool. The funnel's breaking. What are those experiences? How do we create experiments in order to improve that experience?
You've hit on something there that's not in any of our talking points, but I want to drill into. You use both the term funnel and journey. Like, do you think they're the same thing? And what do you think do you think anything is changing in that space recently? With the changes in B2B buyer behavior and some of the technologies that have hit our industry.
Do I think they're the same thing? No. I mean, an experience is something that a customer lives through, and a funnel, in my mind, a funnel is just the scorecard. It tells you, are things happening, in a way that the customer actually is able to keep moving with the experience. A dashboard or a funnel will tell you if the experience is broken or if it's working well. But the experience, that is literally all the things that are going through their mind, how they're experiencing that product, that experience. So for me, at the core, you want to drive a seamless, easy, consistent experience for our customer. And anything that gets in the way results in, changes in the funnel. But no, I don't think they're the same thing. And I think, what's impressive nowadays, John, is like all the tools that we now have to diagnose, right? If something is really changing in that experience. We use Mixpanel a ton, but honestly, I can't tell you how much we talk about instrumenting every possible part of, a product in order to understand where are the drop-offs, what are the changes that we can, again, experiment with. But, I don't know that we discussed this last time, but one of the most exciting parts about most of our jobs now is if you do it right, to get better at a job quickly, your job is to design a portfolio of experiments. And what you have your team do is just experiment on an ongoing basis in order to keep moving in the direction of growth and a better experience. That's exciting to me.
And I think that's like coming right back to the point we made around moving into putting me in and sometimes being aware of the risks. I think it's also important that all of us are resilient enough to know that sometimes we won't always be successful. But actually, you're talking about A/B testing, like really what you're mentioning there, talking about testing anything in a product or in a marketing sense. Microsoft did some research a long time ago now and said every good idea, like we all love wish casting in meetings, especially in product. Like, well, wouldn't it be great if it did our homework for us, if it walked our dog, or look at those lines. And Microsoft found that a third of all ideas actually have a detrimental effect on our customer. A third do absolutely nothing, and a third actually have a positive effect. Which is why if you use that stat and just think about, you're back to the put me in coach element you mentioned a moment ago, like you need to be resilient enough to know that you're only going to be right maybe 30% of the time, and maybe even less than that a lot of it. So, but how do you devise that kind of safety in your team so that they're comfortable only being right a third of the time?
Yeah, I think, it starts with having clear conversations, John, about just that, which is, even if you have, really good intuition and you've been in an area of the world, and you're probably going to be right just over 50% of the time. Like that's just the way it like goes. You can't, just because something is true to you doesn't mean it's going to be true to most of our customers. Very often we're not our customer, and so you can't just assume that's going to work. So it starts with a bit of humility, creation amongst everybody. Like we just got to test it. Let the test tell us where it goes. I think secondly, you start by rewarding the right behaviors, and the bottom line, I can tell you again, our CMO, Michael Strickman, he, a lot of his background is in Uber performance marketing. So at Uber, you can probably imagine the number of, experiments that they ran, and he turned a very complex business into a much more simple one. So he's taking a lot of, what he learned there and teaching us how to do it. We're going through just massive transformation. It's a lot of kudos to him. But at the end of the day, you need to be able to look at all those experiments and build a portfolio of them, knowing that some of them will fail. And so, a big part is communicating to the team. This is just the way we're going to get better. We need to experiment because, frankly, you've heard of, the hippo's opinion, the highest, paid person in the room, that can take over, but that matters nothing. What matters is what your customers actually do. And that's why we do A/B testing left and right.
Completely agree. So you also mentioned sales a moment ago as well. So like, thinking back about all of the different experience you've had across go-to-market and product and sales, like how is that, let's talk about your current role. Like how has that shaped how you approach your partners, or your accountants in bookkeeping case?
Frankly, like I said, I do believe that sales has made me a better marketer. And the reason it's relevant is even within an organization like Xero, right? When we're trying to reach accountants and bookkeepers, our partners, sometimes we do it directly through marketing, and it might be digital means. We go through Google, we go through Bing, we go through a variety of other channels to try to reach them directly. Sometimes we go indirectly through sales, right? We create materials, we create websites that our sales team uses in order to reach our partners. And what's made me a better marketer is having led sales teams. I understand some of the things that might hold the sales teams back from being effective in chatting with our accountants and bookkeepers. And so my point is, I work better with a sales team because I've led one before, and I can understand, what they might need and when they might be running into issues. But at the core, we're all talking to customers. And so, one piece of advice I got a long time ago was, in order to have effective communications, broadly in marketing, but also in sales, you got to speak to the customer in their own words, right? Like we could make things very, very complex, but if you speak back to them in their own words, they're more likely to hear you. They're more likely to realize, okay, this person speaks my language, and engage in conversations or engage in, trialing new products. So that's the part where my sales experience has helped me be a better marketer.
How do you translate that to the channel and to accountants? And like, is there something from that then do we have to change that approach when we're dealing with partners?
I don't think so. There's a couple things that are relevant in terms of how we work with partners, because we work with partners at Xero. Both, obviously they recommend our product to their customers, but we build product for them too, right? So they're both a customer and a channel, and I think we're very comfortable with that notion. We need to understand, that accountants and bookkeepers didn't get into the business of accounting and bookkeeping to sell their services. Like, that's just not something they're very comfortable with, and that's okay. Most accountants that I talk to, they are there to help small businesses succeed. They're in the business of helping. So what I've found that to be true, and I think, John, you and I found this a long time ago, is accountants love to be educated. They love to learn how to use products, how to use them to their full potential, and how to use them to make small businesses' lives better. So in my world, education is a really important tool. It's a really important, almost, base that we can all build on. So a world of creating webinars or certifications that help accountants and bookkeepers better understand a product and the value it adds to their clients, that's a no-brainer. And so, there are certain things that are not salesy. They're just true, right? It's universal. Education is really important. But it helps an accountant get more comfortable recommending a product, right? And so we can all do something with that and add value in ways that seem counterintuitive.
I think the way you describe it there, it's you're dealing with the common challenge of like speaking to what is quite a technical audience. It's the same with developers, right? We don't like being marketed to, but if you can teach us that something is better and educate us and enable us, then we're more often to feel comfortable recommending it and talking about it. And so I think there's a kind of very logical element there that sits with those kind of individuals.
There's a framework that we've used at many places where I've worked, John, which is, if in this case, an accountant or bookkeeper, if you want them to recommend a product on this side of the spectrum, they need to know your product first. They need to be made aware of it. They need to use it. They need to love it in order to recommend it. So know, use, love in order to recommend. There's a spectrum there, and you can play that out across any product, right? Are they actually, do they even know it exists? Once they do, are they using it? If they're not using it, it's going to be hard for them to recommend it. And unless they love it, and so this is when, if an accountant and bookkeeper is talking to you about something and they feel really passionate about it, they probably know it, they use it, and they love it. Otherwise they wouldn't be making that recommendation.
Yeah. I mean, we saw from some of the projects, remember us deploying into Australia and the UK when we were speaking to accountants and bookkeepers, just there was a hockey stick curve when they started to use something that would just mean that they would go from kind of not feeling comfortable to then using it nearly daily. And so we had to get them to hit that hockey stick.
Yeah. And, so I'm not surprised, I think the playbook now for most technology products that work with accountants and bookkeepers is you give it away for free to an accountant or bookkeeper. Just get them to use it because, they'll pay you back in spades. But, if they're not using it, that's almost like, you're stuck at, zero.
Talking about partner enablement, kind of going on a different tangent here. I think this is something that I'm very, very passionate about. You've worked across, you mentioned Receipt Banks, Sage, Visa, Intuit, like all of these finance and accounting companies. Like, what would you say they're doing? I think at the moment also there's a big drive towards let's just deploy more technology, let's deploy a learning system, let's educate them. Like, what would you say companies do well, and what would you say they need to improve on to enable their partners?
More and more, we're learning from each other what works well, and we're trying to build those into accountant partner programs, if you see what I'm saying. I think what companies don't do as well is just spend quality time with accountants, understanding their pain and how we can solve their pain. I think what I've found, as much as I like to say that most of the insights are universal and they're global, and many of them are, is sometimes it's that last little localization, like we call it like last mile localization, is what drives a lot of value for accountants and bookkeepers. And so, I mean, I can tell you just from a specific use case. When I used to work at QuickBooks, there was a product team in Australia that all they did was build last mile localization efforts for small businesses and accountants and bookkeepers. And it was that team that was adding probably the most value of all the product teams, because they were really spending a lot of time with the local customers, understanding, and some of the stuff they did, a US accountant bookkeeper, a US small business would have never, thought of it as important. So my point is, like, you just got to spend time with them in their office, feeling their pain. I think most technology companies are not doing enough of that.
I mean, it comes back to what you were mentioning just a moment ago, like know your customer. In this case, your customer is your partner or bookkeeper or reseller. And if you're not spending time with them to understand them, it's, I think the challenge I always have with that, being really honest, is how you then justify the expense, the time to go and spend time with one or two partners. Like it can be quite difficult if they're not making sales yet to say, like, I want to go and go deep with them. And that's the bit that logically doesn't, I find quite hard to add up.
Yeah, I think, I'll tell you what, the only other thing you just kind of triggered for me, John, is at Xero, I've just found we're a bit of an experiment factory. It's a great thing because you very quickly can tell if something is working or not. And, and you can, if it works, then you can pour gas on that fire. If it doesn't, you pull it, away and you move on. I think many people believe that accountants and bookkeepers will react negatively to experiments. And I don't believe that to be the case. And what I mean by that is, they're customers just like you and me, and they like it when we as, vendors, like, create value for them. Sometimes the best way to do that is, create an experiment, and it might be around partner enablement. It might be about anything you want, but I think they're logical. They understand that, we all have businesses to, make work as well. And so I think most of us are not experimenting enough with accountants and bookkeepers. We certainly experiment a ton with our small businesses. I don't think we experiment enough with accountants and bookkeepers.
I think you've answered my next question with that, which is, what's the one piece of advice you would give to partner marketers looking to stay adaptable? And I think it's to experiment, right? To be comfortable experimenting.
Experiments that are more likely to work, you do need to spend that time to put in that elbow grease, in the office, trying to understand what are the things that are, keeping them up at night, that create a lot of friction for them, and then experiment along those lines. But yeah, I think, they understand. And sometimes we're going to get it right. Sometimes we're going to get it wrong, but there's nothing wrong with experimenting.
So my last question, just to sum up here, because this has been, I think, really, really insightful. Like, what's the one, we started right at the beginning talking about your career from FMCG to Visa to Intuit to Receipt Bank to Xero. Like, what's been the one lesson that's stuck across every role that you've had? What would be the big call out or piece of advice if you could speak to yourself 20 years ago?
Yeah, it probably, I mean, at the risk of sounding repetitive, it's related to put me in coach. It's around, don't be afraid to lean into a risk. Don't be afraid to lean into and take the opportunity that feels a little bit scary at the beginning. Honestly, what's the worst that can happen? A job doesn't work out, and then you go, and you learn about a new one. Chances are, if your manager knows that you are trying really hard and you're putting all of your efforts towards making something happen, most of the time I found they'll give you a chance, and they'll give you more than one chance, because you exhibit that resilience, you exhibit that, willingness to learn. But it is all in your mindset, John. And so I do think it's a great read. Check out Mindset and Grit by Angela Duckworth as well. If you stick with things and you're willing to learn and you kind of persevere, it's very interesting where the world can take you. I can't believe I'm a Guatemalan sitting in California, with, kids that were born in America, but we now live in Australia. It's crazy. But that's what happens when you stick with things and you get educated and you continue to learn. It's exciting where life can take you.
Love it. Luis, it's been a real pleasure to have you on the Tech Marketing Podcast. We've, like I say, when we started, we've known each other a long time, so it's been a long time coming to get you on. And yeah, wish you all the best in the next few career moves. Putting back in coach, and keeping that curious mindset.
Thanks, Jon.